Hello everybody, and thanks for joining me today for how do you create a Windows 10 migration strategy. Today we'll be focusing on what's the latest in modern management updates. My name's Leon Ashton-Leatherland. I'm an internal delivery consultant here at Power On Platforms. So just a brief agenda. First of all, we're going to start off with what's the latest in Configuration Manager. 1906 having recently being announced as available in the slow ring. We'll talk about this terminology more shortly. I will be highlighting some of the new functionality available to help you with your Windows 10 migration. So next we're going to talk about what's the latest in Intune. The service is updated monthly and sometimes features are released on a weekly basis. I'll highlight some of the newest functionality within the past few months, mainly focusing on Windows 10. However, I'm going to just briefly touch on Android and iOS MDM functionality. Finally, I'll cover Autopilot and what the new features have been introduced recently for that service. So to start with Configuration Manager, some considerations. As I mentioned a while ago, some terminology talking about the slow ring. So what you can actually do is once after a new release is announced, for those eager ones amongst you that are keen to maybe test this in a lab first, or indeed in production, you can download a script which will run against your site and enable you to be within the fast ring for the update, meaning you'll be able to take advantage of the new release, or you'll be one of the first customers, within the first customers, to take advantage of the early release. So just want to talk briefly about pre-release features now. So some new features are tagged as pre-release within Config Manager, which means that they're available for early testing in a production environment. So albeit fully supported, the features are still in active development and may receive changes to them until they're no longer considered as pre-release. These features need to be manually enabled in the console, and a one-time accepting of terms and conditions will also need to be carried out. So remain supported. Since 17.10, all versions of the Configuration Manager current branch version are supported for 18 months. During this period, the product is supported for security updates, with the first 4 months supporting security and critical. It's just something to be aware of. Okay, so first of all, what's new with Config Manager? CoManagement. We'll talk about some CoManagement features. So just very briefly, CoManagement. CoManagement is the ability to concurrently manage a Windows 10 device with Configuration Manager and Intune. It enables a controlled and planned approach to switching your different workloads, such as device compliance, from Config Manager to Intune. Multiple pilot collections are now available for CoManagement as of 1906. This enables you to effectively test different workload combinations before switching the authority to Intune. Auto-enrollment now, some changes made here. So historically, the end user would have to log into a device in order for this process to start. This is now negated as the device uses its Azure Active Directory device token to complete the process. You will therefore see your device co-manage faster. So just finally on this one, support has now been added for US government customers. So US government customers are now able to co-manage their devices. So just going to start this demo off now. Essentially, the co-management process, and this first of all highlights US Government Cloud is now a subscription that can be selected. Sign in and authenticate. Next, you'll specify the auto-enrollment collection. In this example, it's a pilot one. And now we're just going to pick a couple of workloads. So we'll select compliance and resource access. on next, and this is where you're able to specify your different collections. As you can see, I've named different collections for different workloads, and that just kind of makes sense. It's quite useful. So as soon as you've got one or more clients that you wish to include into them collections for piloting, a very easy process to keep on top of. So this will take a few minutes now to co-manage the device. I just want to go in afterwards and show you the properties of the co-management settings. You're able to go in retrospectively and ultimately change your co-management settings, but you can go in as well and select your collections. Okay, that's now completed. You can see the co-management settings have been created for that environment. Just take a quick look in the properties there now. This is essentially where you would go to alter your co-management settings for your environment, as well as your collections. It's the staging tab is where your collections are. Okay, great. So what else is new within Config Manager 1906 OSD? First and foremost, the task sequence debugger tool. This is an excellent new troubleshooting tool that will help a lot of admins out there, a lot of OSD experts. Enables you to easily view the variables that have been set within the task sequence and what the values are, etc. Got a short demo on that shortly, so the picture paints a thousand words in that scenario, I feel. Pre-caching, so particularly relevant to in-place upgrade scenarios. There's now the ability to pre-cache additional content types of OS images, packages, and driver packages. Some other improvements I'd like to mention: the disable BitLocker step within the task sequence. You can now specify a specific number of restarts for BitLocker to remain disabled for, instead of having multiple instances of the step. So a couple of new variables to mention. There's a new TS variable, SMSTS reboot delay next. This is now available to complement the existing SMSTS reboot delay. It basically enables you to specify different timeouts for additional reboots. So an example of this scenario would be where perhaps at the start of an in-place upgrade task sequence, you may wish to give an initial 2-hour notification to give the user warning, and then after that subsequent reboots, you would want to be less in order to finish the rest of the process promptly. We've now got a read-only variable available, a very small but I think welcome addition, very useful. SMSTS last content download location, useful for troubleshooting where a task sequence was last attempting to download content to. So a few other features to mention before we'll go into a quick demo. As of 1906, Windows virtual desktops are now supported to be managed. So Windows Virtual Desktop is a preview feature of Azure and Microsoft 365. It's similar to that of a terminal server. It allows multiple concurrent active user sessions to a Windows 10 virtual device. Some changes for delivery optimization. So DO is now included within the client data sources dashboard. This dashboard gives an overview of the various content sources which your clients are using. This release also introduces support for the enabling of the delivery optimization in network caching server role on a distribution point. This is with the aim of conserving bandwidth for DO operations. And finally, not necessarily a new feature, but a mandatory request, a mandatory requirement, should I say. And that's, as of 1906, the client binaries must be signed using the SHA-2 algorithm. Therefore, if you intend to support any older versions of the Windows OS, Windows 7, Server 2008, Server 2008 R2 devices, then you need to ensure that the required update is installed on them to support SHA-2. So let's have a quick demo on OSD. So very briefly, first and foremost, the disable BitLocker step. So you can now specify number of restarts, maximum of 15, because of course as soon as I went in there I tried to put 99 in, that being me. Very useful, with the potential to reduce the complexity of your task sequences. Okay, and moving on, task sequence debugger. So what you can do now is you can deploy a task sequence and using this debug option. So you simply select that and then go through, you select your collection as normal, and then go through deployment, next, finish. That will deploy a debug deployment to that collection. Pretty cool. Let's go and have a look, see what it looks like. Okay, so there's our debug deployment. Let's kick it off. So you'll see a UAC prompt for this, ultimately, so that you have access to the various variables, task sequence variables. The task sequence need to be deployed under the system context. So make sure you elevate that, and there we have it. Task sequence debugger. It's got two windows. You can step through the task sequence one step at a time. It shows you all the steps, your current step, etc. at the top of the window. Various other options as well that are there for testing. And then probably the best part of it is the fact that you've got these task sequence variables and values available to you at the bottom window here. Very useful indeed. So to step through, you could just literally click on step and you'll see the variables change one at a time. Very nice indeed. I can hear a lot of admins screaming out for this out there, so good stuff. Okay. Let's get back to the deck. Okay, let's have a little chat about Intune now. So what's the latest with Intune? Start off with a couple of considerations. So as I mentioned, the service is updated monthly. Within these updates, you will see certain workloads are labeled as public preview. So these will be turned on. It's not like Config Manager, you have to turn them on. They'll be on, they'll be enabled by default, available for use. These features, whilst fully supported, are usually only recommended for small pilot use cases until they're announced as generally available. So just something to make you aware of. I'll just talk about CoManagement again. So the Intune service has been specifically engineered to work with Config Manager in a CoManagement scenario. Attempting to achieve this same kind of effect with another platform, another MDM platform, is not possible. And if the Configuration Manager client detects that another agent is on the subject machine, the Config Manager client will disable any access for Config Manager to all workloads and enable authority to the third-party MDM. This scenario is called a coexistence scenario. Okay, so just cover some of the new features in Intune. Security baselines. It's been out in at least public preview for a while. Fairly recently announced as GA, and even more recently, the configuration for this has been simplified by an update to the portal. I'll briefly show you this shortly. Administrative templates. So whilst we've had the ability to ingest ADMX files as custom config to Intune for a while, there are now some built-in, pre-baked-in administrative template profiles that you can deploy that contain equivalent settings of AD group policies for Windows, Office 365 and OneDrive. They're solely cloud-based, and they enable the configuration of traditional apps and settings within the Windows OS. So also, just to announce, with Windows 10 1903, some new CSPs are available. So just a quick brief overview. Configuration Service Provider is an interface in which you can amend configurations on a Windows 10 device. And each version of Windows 10 will introduce a new set. Some configurations will be available within the Intune portal through profiles, such as device restrictions or security baselines, as we've mentioned. However, there may be occasion where there's a setting not available, and in this instance, you need to see if there's a CSP available. So one at the moment that's currently available and not within the UI is the ability to set the time zone, which we'll show you shortly. Applicability rules, new feature. This is the ability to set properties on a configuration profile so that the profile will only apply to a specific edition or version of Windows 10. And finally, to mention the PowerShell SDK. So now on the second release within the PowerShell gallery, this SDK supports the Intune API through Microsoft Graph, supporting a host of potential automation opportunities. The SDK was recently updated to support Azure automation. So let's have a look at Intune. So I've already deployed a security baseline to my test machine, as I wanted to show you the reporting of that back to the console. This is kind of the benefit straight away that you'll get from this. Highlighting your security baseline posture against Windows 10 machines that it's deployed to. You can be very granular with each setting. Okay. The intention for these baselines is to have there'll be different versions released from Microsoft, and then what you're able to do is then compare versions to each other before upgrading a deployment to a different version of the baseline. You can also view the per setting status as well as per a normal deployment of some configuration within Intune. Recommendation here is if you're in an environment where you've deployed device restrictions out to machines, you want to understand where there's going to be conflicts with security baselines, is to isolate a test machine and deploy configure a baseline, deploy that to it along with the device restrictions, and then that will highlight the conflicts. Recommend to remove any conflict in settings from your device restrictions and utilize security baselines. Okay, so we also have administrative templates. So let's have a look at creating one of them. So profiles, create a profile, and then demo. So my favourite, most useful feature I've had out of this so far is the ability to silently log into OneDrive for Business enable known folder remove, and restrict the user the ability to be able to change the direction of their the location of their their known folders, excuse me, from OneDrive back to Windows. So select Windows 10 and later, administrative templates. You have to create a configuration first before you can actually edit the settings. So I'll just edit the one just for illustration here. There we go. Silently move Windows known folders to OneDrive and silently assign in users to OneDrive sync. One thing to note: once you select a setting and enable it, click on OK. That's saved and that's done. So if this profile is deployed to machines, just to be aware of that. Something to be aware of. Okay. So let's create a Windows 10 CSP now. I mentioned in 1903 introduced the ability to set the time zone. So let's have a look at that. Windows 10 as the platform. This time we're going to create some custom configuration. And we're going to add an OMA URI setting. Give it a name, description if you wish. I'll just get the string that's required. There we go. Make sure the period is in at the beginning and there are forward slashes in the path. That's good to me. Data type is string, and I'm going to pick the time zone. Select OK, and then we're going to create this config. But first of all, I just want to talk about applicability rules. So these are available within a profile now, Windows 10 profile, and at the moment we have available to either assign or not assign a profile based on the OS edition or version, which is quite useful in some scenarios. Okay, it's quite a new feature. So we'll create this profile and we'll assign it just to my test machine very quickly. Excellent. Okay. So we'll just log into the machine. A few password issues there. Apologies for that. Okay, so let's get the logs ready. So it's event ID 814 we're looking for, and we're going to just carry out a quick sync. This manually syncs in with the Intune service. There's something interesting to mention here, just while that is syncing, and that's with the introduction of Windows 10 1903. Policy refresh is now available for any of the settings within the policy CSP. So every 8 hours, rather than the device just checking into the service for new config and new profiles, it will indeed reapply and refresh existing config. Again, that's only available Windows 10 1903 and for settings within the policy CSP. Okay, so that's synced. Let's have a quick look and see if we've got our event ID 814. And there we go, configure time zone. Looks good to me. That's all been set. Good stuff. Okay. So I just want to briefly talk about Android, iOS, and Mac MDM devices. Appreciate slightly off the topic, but nice just to spend a few moments to illustrate some of the new developments in these areas. So Android, there's been significant development within this area over the past, well, definitely over the past year or longer. This is primarily within the Android enterprise space, which is now considered as modern Android device management. With it brings different ways of managing an Android device for different enterprise use case scenarios, as well as a completely new way of deploying OEM-specific configurations to a device using OEM config. It's a very interesting area, that is. It should be noted that the legacy device admin is being removed from support by Google as of Android 10 and later. So plan for that accordingly. Moving on to iOS. So there's been some recent developments as a result of the announced changes with iOS 13 and the introduction of a dedicated iPad OS. Also, some settings that were able to be set without the device being supervised will now require the device to be supervised moving forward. For example, the ability to turn off FaceTime is just one of them examples. So again, plan for that accordingly. 0-day support for that within Intune. So bear that in mind. macOS Intune has recently supports the encryption of Mac devices using File Vault. Okay, so moving on to Autopilot. A couple of considerations here for Autopilot. Windows 10 version, the Autopilot service feature support is very heavily reliant on the version of Windows 10 you are trying to provision. So just ensure that you're on a supported version for the features that you are expecting to use. Intune releases, so additional functionality to integrate with the Autopilot service that is Intune specific is often announced within the monthly service releases. So what have we got that's new? Introduced in Windows 10 1903 is Autopilot White Glove. So this gives the ability for partners or IT departments to provision devices with settings, policies and apps before handing the device over to the end user, significantly reducing the user's first logon experience and improving the user experience as well. Things within the releases within Intune. So we've had the ability to specify the end user to a specific device within the bulk import. That's been added. Just something to be aware of as of 1903, unless changed within the Autopilot profile, the default telemetry setting is set to full. Also, fairly recently announced, as of Windows 10 18 or 9 and newer, hybrid Azure AD join is available for Autopilot. So just to illustrate the process, there's some screenshots here. So providing White Glove was enabled within the Autopilot profile, pressing the Windows key 5 times will bring you to this screen within the deployment, and you can select Windows Autopilot provisioning. We'll then take you to this screen with a QR code. This is provided for convenience to mark the device as starting White Pilot, for you to mark this within your internal systems. You then proceed and select provision. Apps, config, etc. will be deployed within the device context to the machine. Once that's complete, you'll see the green screen with the barcode to mark the system as completed. Again, you can mark this, provision this in your internal systems if required. Selecting Reseal will now shut down the device, rendering it ready for the end user. Thanks very much for joining me today. I hope that's been informative for you. And if you've got any questions, feel free to contact us at info@poweronplatforms.com. Thank you.